Just let me know if you can hear me. I'm sorry for being late. So we can get started. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so it's 3:05. So just like I introduced myself in the first session, my name is Confidence Nyirenda. I am a Web3 developer, and I've been working in the blockchain industry ever since 2016. So this makes it almost complete 8 years. I used to be a developer when I left college, working at a cryptocurrency exchange, and I've worked with a number of blockchains to date. So it's a pleasure to have you all here. We hope that we'll work with you throughout until the end, and we'll be able to see you during the hackathon. And we look forward to see you build wonderful stuff using the internet computer technology. So today we're just going to look at what the blockchain is. So let me just share my screen with you. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so if you have any question, just keep your question probably by the end of the presentation. You can then ask your question. So I'll start by a quote from the Trust Machine, which is an article from The Economist on the 31st of October 2015, which says, to understand the power of blockchain systems and the things they can do, it is important to distinguish between three things that are commonly muddled up, namely the Bitcoin currency, the specific blockchain that underpins it, and the idea of blockchains in general. So when we talk about blockchains, there's these three things, which is the Bitcoin. Why here they specifically mentioned Bitcoin is because then it was one of the dominating Bitcoin currency, or should we say blockchain, at the moment, back in 2015. Today we have a lot of cryptocurrencies. Today we have a lot of blockchains that have been created. I'm sure you all know about Ethereum, about Solana. All of those are types of blockchains that have different functionalities. But there is the currency, which is different from what the blockchain is. And then there is also the specific blockchain that underpins that currency, and then the idea of blockchains in general. So blockchain has many meanings. If you are to look at a phone, right? If somebody is describing a phone, they can describe a phone as the idea of a phone network, right? Or they can also describe it as a specific phone network. Sure, in Zambia, there is, I think there's Airtel and other networks. And then they can also be speaking about a specific use of the phone network, which is an example of a fax. The same goes for the blockchain technology. We have blockchain as the idea of the blockchain, then blockchain as the specific blockchain that underlies Bitcoin or any other coin that is out there. And then also Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. So usually when somebody is describing blockchain, it is always important for you to understand what they are really talking about. So then what is a blockchain? So a blockchain is a technology that permits transactions to be gathered into blocks and recorded. They are recorded cryptographically, and they are also chained together in a chronological order, and that allows the resulting ledger to be accessed by different servers. So here the concept of blockchain and why it exists today. It is in a way trying to create a record that is immutable, that cannot be changed by anyone, that cannot just be easily erased in a way. I'm sure we all know sometimes when people record stuff, at times you might hear that the records have been stolen, sometimes you hear the records have been deleted, or maybe somebody has altered those records. But here the blockchain is giving us a different way of recording our data or recording transactions, should we say, and in a way that they cannot be altered, which is very important for security reasons and also for history's sake. If we want to check something that has happened in the past, it is important that we know or we trust that that particular data has not been altered. So this is how a distributed ledger, or how you would want to look at what a distributed ledger is. But before we look at distributed ledgers, we want to look at what problem then emanated that led people to actually start innovating and looking at creating what we call a distributed ledger. So for example, here we have an example of a bank. We have so many examples of centralized ledgers, but a bank is something that we all know, that we all understand. So for instance, if we have a bank, right, a bank and its whole entity, its whole job is for facilitating transactions between one person that we are calling client A and another person which we are calling client B or client C or client D, and the list goes on. So for instance, if I want to send a transaction from my account to somebody like Francis, I'm just picking someone from the call, like Francis Lungu, and I want to send them 1,000 kwacha. Even if I am with Francis in the same location, if I send a transaction, it might seem as if the money just jumped from my bank account into Francis's account. But in essence, what happened is there's a third party that is going to know about what I have done, or that I have sent Francis a transaction, right? So this single entity, what they're basically doing is taking a record of everything that is happening within, be it a community. Let's say this is a community or this is a country. All the people that are in this call, whenever we send transactions to each other, there is a single entity here, which is the bank, that is going to record each and everyone's transaction, and they will take note, and then they will make sure that everybody as transaction is being recorded in that ledger. So what are the problems or the potential threats that can be witnessed in this type of a ledger? It has a single point of failure. If this bank fails, or if they in a way have somebody who maliciously delete some transactions or create some transactions that did not exist, that is going to be an issue. And there's going to be trust issues also with all the other parties that are involved. So like here, the bank is holding the golden record of everyone and everyone in what everybody is doing. So they can also manipulate that record. They can also do things that do not go by the rules of what everybody had agreed at the beginning. And all this is because of the trust that has been put into a single entity. The alternative to that is a distributed ledger, as you can see on the right side of this page. We have, instead of one golden record that we all trust that they are going to do the right thing, we have some nodes that will make a record of the single ledger that we have. So there is one ledger here, and all the nodes that have some level of access to that ledger. All the nodes agree to a protocol that determines the true state of the ledger at any point in time. Again, if I go back to my example of me sending a transaction to Francis, if I send a transaction to Francis, instead of one entity recording that transaction is created in a ledger, and then it is distributed to all the other nodes so that they can agree. To give you a perfect example, let's say this is a village, okay? All the people are in this core are part of that village, and we are all the elders in the village, okay? And I want to do a transaction. Say I want to sell some goats to Francis again, and Francis is going to pay me probably with some grains, okay? So once I have some goats that the whole community here knows about, and I transfer them to Francis, the next thing that is going to happen is we are all going to acknowledge that for sure the goals have been transferred into ownership from my account into Francis's account. And if everybody knows that, if in a way I try to say the next day that these goats belong to me, everyone in the community will come and say, can we verify this? And once we have, once the whole community then rejects that proposal or what I am saying, then that transaction is rejected. Or if Francis says these are my goats and checks with the whole community, then if the whole community agrees that those goals belong to Francis, then everyone agrees, and then that means that statement or whatever Francis has said is valid. So basically, this is what or how the distributed ledger works. So we have a single entry and a multiple entry entity within the distributed ledgers. Okay, so here we just have an example of a distributed ledger where the nodes, they all agree to one ledger record that is being used, but it's then distributed. Whereas here we have different nodes that then agree afterwards, but all of them, they are holding different types of records. So how might a distributed ledger work? So here a user initiates a transaction using their digital signature. So on the blockchain, we have additional signature, which is unique to everyone. And then after they have initiated the transaction, a user will then broadcast their transaction to the nodes. So this is equivalent to sending a transaction to Francis. Then one or more nodes begin validating each transaction. So then the nodes are now checking if those if that transaction has been initiated within that blockchain. Is it not counterfeit money, or is it not a counterfeit transaction? And then the nodes aggregate validated transaction into blocks. So then they're aggregated into blocks. Like we said, they are chained into blocks. And then the nodes broadcast blocks to each other. And then a consensus protocol is then used. So consensus is just the agreement that each and every node has been updated with the status or the new status of the blockchain. And then the block reflecting this true state is then changed to the prior block. So this is a process that keeps on happening each and every time a transaction is initiated. So it just goes through this process, and then it ends with the block being changed to the prior block. So where might blockchain use cryptography? Okay, so cryptography is used basically within most of the functionalities of the blockchain. So on initiating and broadcasting of transaction, like I mentioned, there's a digital signature. You can also think of this as like a fingerprint. Everyone has a unique fingerprint that they use, and there's no, even twins do not have a matching fingerprint. So this is just like a digital signature. And then it's also used on private keys, and then validation of transactions. So there's a lot of techniques that are used. So we also have proof of work, we have proof of stake, and other that are now existing, or that are still coming up. And all of these, they use cryptography for them to work. And then when we are also generating what was called a hash function, which is basically the chaining of one block to the other, that will make it easier for us to reference which block came after another. So the power of a distributed ledger. So this is now the reasons why it is better to have a distributed ledger as compared to a centralized ledger. So it can be used without a central authority by individuals or entities with no bias, basis to trust each other. So you always hear the issue of trust when we are discussing distributed ledgers or blockchain. One of the biggest issues that we have had in the past is systems that are full of issues, and the issues to do with trust. Common example that I've given of a bank. We have seen a lot of banks in the world being closed. Some of them, they are involved in issues to do with money being stolen, money, there's no trace of where money went to and stuff like that. All these issues are emanating from the issue that we have a centralized ledger, which no one else has access to. So it can also be used to create value and also issue some assets. It can be used to record those transfers of value or ownership. So all of these things are the uses that we can use distributed ledgers. Just like with banks, the main function of a bank is to record. Here, blockchain or distributed ledgers can be used to record. We can also record assets. We can record value transfer and the likes. And the degree of trust between users determines the technological configuration of a distributed ledger. So there are different types of distributed ledgers. You will hear about private blockchains, you will hear about public blockchains, and you will hear also about hybrid blockchains. An example of a public blockchain is Bitcoin. So whenever you send a transaction between one user to the other, you find the transaction can be seen publicly. I can just go on the Bitcoin blockchain and see how many people are actually sending Bitcoin transaction within the hour. So like, yeah, this is what I was just talking about, how my distributed ledgers proposal differ. So the participation, if it is open, we have an open participation and closed. So that means, and in open participation, anyone can just use that blockchain. An example again is Bitcoin. And then we can have a closed participation. An example is probably a blockchain that is being used maybe by a company or maybe an auditing firm, where the records do not have to be public. Okay. And then we have permission. So with an open blockchain, it is permissionless, and then in a closed blockchain, it is permissioned. So what this means is that you have to be permissioned, or you have to be given permission if you need to use this type of a blockchain which is closed, but here in a permissionless like blockchain, you do not need to get some permission. And then the ledger design, usually we have one ledger in an open blockchain and then one ledger or segregated ledgers. Then validation. So the method depends on the degree of trust between nodes. Where there is no basis of trust may be achieved through proof of work, which requires the algorithmic solving of a cryptographic hash. So the validation or the method that is used for validation, it all depends with the degree of trust between the nodes. Then consensus mechanisms. A mechanism that depends on the degree of trust between nodes. Where there is no centralized authority, consensus may be determined algorithmically. So basically, this is an introduction to distributed ledger and what a blockchain is and how it functions, the types of blockchains also in this matter. Yeah, so I'll take probably the next 2 minutes to if there is anyone with questions, anyway you need some clarity, feel free to ask any questions. Also, if your mic is not working or it has any challenges, just you can type your question in the chat box.
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I wanted to find out. There you talked about ledger design.
Yes.
In an open, you have got one ledger, and then the closed, you can have one ledger or segregated ledgers. Kindly explain a little bit on that.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part.
On the closed blockchain setup, you are saying you can have one or segregated ledgers. So can you just explain on those segregated ledgers how they can work in a closed setup?
Okay, so so in a closed setup, right? There might be, let's say, in an organization, some parts of a ledger that does not have to be accessed by some type of users or some. Yes, so basically we have different types of people in an organization, from probably a CEO down to probably a junior worker, and they have different types of access to the ledger. So that means there has to be some segregation, right? And instead of just having one ledger, you can have some separate ledgers, but then they can communicate where there is probably some area of commonality. But the idea is there has to be some access level where somebody who's not supposed to access some type of data is not allowed to have access to that data. But in an open ledger, everything has to be accessible to everyone, and everybody should be able to see everything that's has been recorded on that ledger. So that is where there is some differences. So this is still a choice between, according also to how that organization is set up or how they actually want the information or the data to be accessed. If there is to be some level, then it's going to be segregated, but still it can be one ledger, which everybody can just access if or as long as they are in that organization. I hope that is clear.
Yeah, I think it's very clear. Thank you so much, Constance.
Okay, any other questions? Guys, feel free to ask if you have any other questions. So one of the most important things to note about blockchain and why it exists in today's or the modern world. Bitcoin itself as a currency was created as an alternative and an alternative to the banking system. And probably most of you know, maybe you don't know, whoever created Bitcoin up to date is not known. No one really has information of who they are. And they did this because they understood how powerful this technology was. And it's also a great example to show that there is no need for an authority that can be at the top when you have a distributed ledger technology that is being used, be it on a currency or any type of a blockchain. So one of the best examples I always give people is how money has evolved from barter trading up until when we have banks, when we have currency and stuff. And what you normally observe from each and every stage of money evolving, it's because at every stage there were some issues or there were some problems that were faced by people. Barter trading always had an issue of double coincidence of wants. What do I mean by that? If I have something that I want to barter trade with someone, let's say I have some goats and somebody has some grain. If that person wants goats and I want some crates, so some grain, I mean, that means that trade is going to happen. But what happens when I have something that nobody wants, but I want something from those people? Then that means that there's no trade that is going to happen, because then every time when you want to do that trade, there has to be somebody who wants what you have, right? And this is what led to people creating other forms of money. We moved to using gold coins. There were some problems with using gold coins where in the Roman Empire, people were shaving off part of that gold, those gold coins, and creating other coins, and then that means somebody created money from nothing. They didn't work for it, and then they were able to just get rich from nothing. So you will see all these problems, and then we also moved to using banknotes. Banknotes, they are counterfeit. Sometimes when you go to some certain countries, you hear that the notes can be fake. Sometimes people can give you fake money, and then that is also a huge issue. Then we moved to using banking cards. You know, you can swipe anywhere, or you can just use your money online using a bank card. But then that also came with its own issues where people were double spending the same money. I don't know if you've seen this, but apparently it's one of the biggest headaches for banks. Double spending issues. So all of these problems now have left us, or have brought us to a point where we have distributed ledgers that are solving the issues to do with double spending, the issues to do with counterfeit money. So an example on the Bitcoin blockchain, you cannot create fake Bitcoin. You cannot create a fake currency. And there is no way for you to actually delete a transaction or remove a transaction anyway. And anything that has been done on that blockchain is permanent and it's final. And I hope that also clarifies. what we've been discussing. I see, William, you have a hand up. You can unmute and ask away.
Mr. Nguyen, there is a question in the chat box.
Okay, I'll just go through it. Do we have any scalability boom in the usage of blockchain technology? Not sure what you refer to as scalability boom, as in, maybe if you can clarify that. What do you mean by scalability boom? I'm just trying to get clarity of what you mean. But if probably maybe I understand what you're trying to ask is there scalability boom? Do we see blockchain technology being used in all industries? Okay, that's a great question. That's a great question. Yes, I believe that in the future, probably a lot of years from now, a lot of people are going to see the benefits of using blockchain technology in all industries. Because one of the biggest issues that we have is data. Data is one of the biggest selling points in the world right now. Every company that is building something, they are more and more focused on data. And it gets to a point where people then realize that, okay, data is being sold, my data is being sold, or whatever data is being sold. So then there is need to restructure a way, or then rethink about the best way we can protect our data. And sometimes when data goes into the wrong hands, it leads to a lot of terrible consequences. So I believe, yes, we will see a rise in the use of blockchain technology in a lot of industry. I believe at the moment, there is still a lot of figuring out. We are still early when it comes to blockchain technology. Bitcoin has only been in existence from 2009 until date. That's not a lot of years. And there is still the need for us to see the technology itself develop and see how far it can stretch and how far it can go in terms of its usage. Right now, for the past 10 years or so, we've been mainly seeing all the developments happening in the finance sector. And right now, we now have a different blockchain like internet computer, which is kind of very, very different from what we've seen before. And this is where I believe the turning point is, and we'll start to see other types of blockchains that are going to be really life-changing, and also they are going to change a lot of things to do with the future technology. That was a great question, by the way. I hope I answered it very well. Sure, anytime. Okay, so if we don't have any further questions, this was a really short session just to complement the first session that we had. So we don't want to take much of your time. And we are going to start, we're going to have another session also. We're going to go through the introduction to the internet computer. And we'll have a poll in the Telegram group. So just make sure probably 20 minutes from now, we're going to find out which times work best for everyone or for most people, so that we don't have other people missing out on the sessions. And then we'll take it from there. Otherwise, thank you everyone for attending this session. We'll see you in the Telegram group for updates on how we are going to be running this session. Yeah. Okay. I think that's a text from Frederick. Let me just read through. While blockchain technology has shown significant potential and is being explored across various industries, it's important to note that its widespread adoption and usage in all industries are still in progress. True. As of now, blockchain technology has made significant inroads in certain sectors, while others are still in the early stage of experimentation and adoption. My 2 cents. Yes, I agree with that point for sure. Like I was saying, we are still in the early stages. There's a lot of experimenting that is being done. I've seen another blockchain that is called Peak. They are experimenting with using blockchain for what are called deepins. So yeah, we still have a lot to see within the next decades, and I think the future is going to be exciting. I think it's going to be exciting. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll send you updates on the next session, and we hope to see you during this week. I hope you have enjoyed, and let's see how it goes. Thank you, and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Nyirenda.
Cheers.
We'll find